Billionaire lost everything until the woman he rejected saved him. He had everything: power, fame, money, until one mistake destroyed it all. And when his world collapsed, the only person who could save him was the woman he once broke. Hello everyone, subscribe now to keep these stories of love loss and redemption alive. Comment on your city so we can feel how far our hearts travel. Every click helps another soul believe in love again. Now, let's continue with the story. The glass walls of Caldwell Capital shimmered in the morning sun, reflecting the skyline of Manhattan like a kingdom made of steel. Inside, Ethan Caldwell stood at the top floor, his hands tucked in the pockets of his tailored navy suit. To everyone else, he was the perfect picture of success, the billionaire genius who turned an app into an empire. But success had sharpened him like glass, clear cold, and ready to cut anyone who got too close. He spoke with a calm authority that made people listen. Investors called him the man who never loses. What they didn't know was how much he hated losing control. Ava Hart knew. 2 years ago, she had been a quiet design manager at the same company, Creative Kind, and painfully honest. She once stayed late to help with Ethan's product pitch deck, her hands trembling as she confessed her feelings. He hadn't even looked up from his laptop. "People like you fall in love," he said flatly. "People like me build empires." That sentence shattered her. The next morning, Ava resigned without a word. Ethan never thought about her again, or so he told himself. Now, as he stood in his office with the view of Central Park, his assistant rushed in, pale and anxious. "Sir, there's a problem with the Horizon Fund. The auditors found irregular transfers. Reporters are calling." Ethan frowned. "Handle it," he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Minutes later, his phone buzzed again. Another call, another alert, another headline. Caldwell Capital accused of insider trading. By noon, stock prices plunged faster than the winter wind. By sunset, the board demanded his resignation. And by midnight, the man who had everything watched his name turn into a scandal across every news screen. He left the office alone, his steps echoing through the marble lobby. The city outside felt colder than usual. Billboards still carried his face. Ethan Caldwell, visionary of the year. Now it just felt ironic. He walked past a coffee shop, the smell of roasted beans filling the air, and for a fleeting second, he remembered the girl who used to bring him coffee with a shy smile and messy notebook sketches. Ava. He wondered if she ever forgave him. He wondered if forgiveness was something money could buy. When a cold gust swept down Fifth Avenue, Ethan realized something he'd never felt before. For the first time in his life, he had no one to call, no company to run, and no plan to save himself. Somewhere in the city that never slept, a door from his past was about to open again. 3 months had passed since Ethan Caldwell vanished from the headlines. New York had already moved on. The city never mourned its fallen kings for long. Ethan now rented a small studio in Brooklyn, a far cry from his glass-walled penthouse in Manhattan. The place smelled faintly of old wood and instant coffee. He woke up before dawn, searching job listings on a cracked laptop, his once steady hands now rough from days of doing manual work. He needed a job, any job. One chilly morning, while walking past a community art center, he saw a sign taped to the window, "Assistant needed, temporary position." He hesitated, staring at the colorful murals inside. Children laughed, volunteers painted with joy that money couldn't buy. Something inside him stirred. He stepped in. The front desk clerk, a cheerful older woman, smiled, looking to volunteer. "Something like that," Ethan replied quietly. "My name's Ethan Cole." It was the first lie he told to protect himself. Minutes later, a woman walked out from a back office carrying a tablet and a coffee cup. Her hair was tied in a low bun, her clothes simple but professional. For a heartbeat, Ethan forgot how to breathe. Ava Hart. Her voice was calm, professional, the same as it used to be when she worked for him. But her eyes, they held no trace of the girl he once dismissed, only quiet confidence. "You're here for the assistant position?" she asked. Ethan nodded, keeping his tone even. "Yes, ma'am." Ava studied him for a moment, her gaze brushing over the stubble, the worn jacket, the humility that seemed out of place on his once arrogant face. "All right, Mr. Cole," she said finally. "No special treatment here. You'll clean, organize supplies, and help with the kids' art classes. Think you can handle that?" "Yes," Ethan answered, his voice low but steady. "I can handle that." As she handed him a clipboard, their fingers brushed a small spark, like a memory refusing to die. Ava didn't recognize him yet. Or maybe she did and chose silence. Either way, fate had placed them back in the same frame, but this time he wasn't the one giving orders. Ethan showed up every morning before sunrise. The Brooklyn air had that crisp bite of late autumn, and the smell of wet paint and coffee filled the art center. He swept floors, carried boxes, and fixed broken chairs, tasks that once would have insulted the man he used to be. Now they grounded him. Ava watched him from her glass office window. She didn't understand why this stranger, quiet, polite, and oddly precise, felt so familiar. Something about the way he folded his sleeves and the sharp look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching stirred a memory she didn't want to name. Still, she kept her distance. She'd learned that distance kept her heart safe. One Saturday, Ethan was assigned to help with the kids' art fair preparations. He spent hours building display stands with an older volunteer named Frank. When Frank's arthritis acted up, Ethan took over the heavy lifting without complaint. By noon, his palms were blistered. He didn't flinch. Ava approached with a clipboard in hand. "Mr. Cole, you don't have to do everything yourself," she said. "I don't mind," he replied. His tone was steady, but his breathing gave him away. Ava hesitated. She reached into her bag and handed him a small bottle of antiseptic. "Here, for your hands." Ethan accepted it with a nod. "Thank you, Miss Hart." The name slipped from his tongue too easily, and she looked up startled. "You know my name." He froze for a second. It was on the bulletin board, he lied quickly. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she let it go. For now. Later that afternoon, the heater broke in the main hall. The maintenance man wouldn't arrive until morning, and the temperature was dropping fast. The art supplies had to be moved before the paint froze. Ava tried to lift one of the heavy boxes of canvases, but it slipped from her grip. Before it could hit the floor, Ethan caught it with one arm. "Careful," he said softly. His voice wasn't commanding, it was worried. For a brief moment, their eyes met. There was no boardroom, no hierarchy, just two people breathing the same cold air, trying not to feel what was rising between them. "I'm fine," Ava murmured, stepping back. She crossed her arms, half to keep warm, half to keep her walls up. Ethan nodded, but something in her tone cut deeper than the cold. He remembered that same defiant look from years ago, the night she'd stood in his office, heart in her eyes, before he'd broken it with careless words. He clenched his jaw, forcing the memory away. That evening, as the staff packed up, Frank patted Ethan's shoulder. "Don't take it personally, kid," he said with a knowing smile. "Miss Hart's tough on everyone. This place nearly went under a few years back. She built it from scratch. People respect her, maybe even fear her a little." Ethan nodded slowly. He already knew that kind of strength, the kind born from surviving heartbreak. When everyone left, he stayed behind to finish cleaning. The empty hall echoed with faint sounds, brushes clinking wind against the windows, the ghost of laughter fading into night. He looked at his reflection in the glass door. Gone was the billionaire in the $1,000 suit. What stared back at him was a man stripped bare of pride and maybe finally ready to learn. Outside, Ava locked her office, pausing at the doorway to glance back. Through the window, she saw him alone, sweeping the floor with quiet focus. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. She whispered to herself, "I've seen that look before." The city lights flickered through the rain-streaked glass. Neither of them knew it yet, but the wound between them was beginning to reopen, not to destroy, but to heal. Snow drifted across the city like a whisper. Inside the Brooklyn Art Center, paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling, and the smell of cocoa filled the air. Ethan had been working there for 2 months now. He still used the name Ethan Cole, but every day it felt heavier to carry that lie. He'd traded his penthouse view of Central Park for the sound of children laughing in paint-splattered rooms, and strangely, it didn't feel like a loss anymore. Ava walked through the hallway, clipboard in hand checking last-minute decorations for the holiday showcase. Her hair was down today, and a few strands brushed against her cheeks. Ethan caught himself staring before looking away. "Mr. Cole," she said, stopping near him. "You finished the stage setup already?" He nodded. "Just wrapped it up." "Good." Her tone was professional, but the edge she used to carry was softer now. "Thank you for helping out. You've been dependable." Ethan's chest tightened at the word. It had been years since anyone said that to him without expecting something in return. That evening, the center hosted a pizza night for the volunteers. Ava insisted everyone eat together before the big event. The long tables were filled with art teachers, kids, and parents. Laughter bounced off the walls like music. Ethan sat at the end quietly folding napkins until one of the little girls, Mia, maybe 6, walked up with paint smudged on her cheek. "Mr. Cole, come sit next to Miss Ava," she said loudly. Everyone chuckled. Ava shook her head, amused. "Mia, he's fine right there." But the girl didn't give up. She tugged on Ava's sleeve. "Please, he looks lonely." The table went silent for a second. Ethan smiled awkwardly. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he said gently, but Ava gestured toward the chair beside her anyway. "Come on, Mr. Cole, it's just pizza." So he joined her. Steam rose from the slices as they ate. Ava told stories about the kids' art projects, how one painted a flying dog, another built a cardboard rocket ship. Her laugh was unguarded genuine. Ethan found himself laughing too. It felt unfamiliar and good. "You don't laugh much, do you?" she teased. "Not lately," he admitted. "Guess I forgot how." Ava looked at him for a moment, and something flickered behind her eyes, not recognition, but compassion. Later that night, after everyone left, Ethan stayed to put away supplies. The heat had shut off again, and his breath came out in small clouds. He heard footsteps Ava back to grab her coat. "You shouldn't still be here," she said. "It's freezing." He shrugged. "Someone has to lock up." She hesitated, then walked over and handed him a paper cup. "Hot chocolate. It's the last one." Their fingers brushed as he took it. A quiet warmth spread between them, stronger than the cocoa. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, snow tapped against the windows, soft, rhythmic, like a lullaby. Ethan finally said, "You've built something special here. People care about this place. About you." Ava smiled faintly. "It wasn't easy. There were times I almost gave up, but then I'd remember why I started." "What was that?" he asked. Her voice softened. "To prove that kindness still matters even when people don't." He didn't answer, because deep down he knew he was the reason she'd once stopped believing that. Ava zipped her coat and headed for the door. "Good night, Mr. Cole." He lifted the cup slightly. "Good night, Miss Hart." After she left, Ethan stood in the quiet hall, the cocoa cooling in his hand, a strange warmth in his chest that refused to fade. Outside, the city slept under a thin blanket of snow. Inside, a man once blinded by pride was beginning to see the beauty in something as simple as sharing a cup of cocoa. The night of the winter showcase arrived. Fairy lights lined the hallway, paintings by children hung on every wall, and laughter filled the air like a melody. Ava stood near the entrance greeting guests with that calm confidence that made everyone feel at home. Ethan adjusted the sound system in the back of the hall. He wasn't part of the spotlight. He was just the guy making sure the microphones worked, the stage didn't collapse, and the cocoa stayed warm. He liked it that way. It was quieter, simpler. As families filled the seats, Ava gave her opening speech. She thanked the volunteers, the sponsors, and the community that made the Art Center possible. Her voice trembled slightly when she said, "Kindness builds more than walls. It builds hearts." Ethan smiled from the back, a strange pride blooming in his chest. But by morning, everything changed. The next day, the Art Center's email inbox exploded with messages. News outlets had published an article. Disgraced billionaire Ethan Caldwell resurfaces at Brooklyn Art Center. The story included photos, Ethan carrying paint boxes standing next to Ava, smiling with the kids. The reporter wrote that Ava's charity was being used as a redemption front to repair Ethan Caldwell's public image. Within hours, donors began calling to pause their support. The Art Center's social media flooded with comments, some cruel, some mocking, all questioning Ava's credibility. She sat in her office, staring at the screen, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. The name Ethan Caldwell burned through every paragraph. Her mind raced. Ethan Cole, his sharp posture, that familiar glance, the way he'd said her name the first week. It all clicked. When Ethan walked into the center that afternoon, he knew something was wrong. People avoided his eyes. Frank barely nodded at him. Ava was waiting in the main hall, the folded newspaper in her hand. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. Her silence was heavier than both. "You lied to me," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake, it cut clean. "Your name isn't Ethan Cole." He stepped forward, his throat dry. "Ava, I can explain." "No." She held up a hand. "I gave you a place here. I trusted you with people I care about, and you let them use this center for another headline." Ethan's heart pounded. "I didn't plan that article. I swear I didn't even know." "But you knew who you were," she said, "and you let me believe a lie." He tried again, desperate now. "I didn't come here for pity. I came because I needed to start over, because I—" "Stop." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with disappointment. "You always say that, don't you? That you need something, that the world owes you another chance. But the truth is, you never changed. You just changed the scenery." Her words struck like winter wind, sharp, clean, and final. Ethan stood there, unable to find air. All the words he wanted to say about regret, about how she was right, about how much he respected her, died before they reached his lips. Ava turned away. "Please leave Mr. Caldwell." That title, Mr. Caldwell, sounded like a wall slamming shut. He nodded slowly. "All right." He walked out without another word. Outside, the cold hit like punishment. The first snow of February fell soft but relentless. He shoved his hands in his coat pockets, feeling the antiseptic bottle she'd once given him. The lights from the center glowed faintly behind him, a place that had felt like home for the first time in years. Now it was just another building where he'd managed to ruin something good. Back inside, Ava sat alone in the darkened hall. The laughter from the showcase still echoed in her head. On the table beside her sat the newspaper, and beneath it, a folded thank you letter Ethan had written days before, never given. She picked it up, hesitated, then set it back down. Her voice barely a whisper. Why did it have to be him? That night, Ethan packed his few belongings into a small duffel bag. He stared out the cracked window of his apartment, watching snow gather on the sill. The city lights blurred into a smear of color, beautiful and distant, like the life he once had. He thought of Ava's voice, her laughter, the way she looked when she talked about kindness. And for the first time since he lost everything, Ethan realized this wasn't just another business failure. He hadn't only lost trust, he had lost the only person who made him believe he could be better. The sound of gulls and the faint crash of waves replaced the hum of New York traffic. Ethan Caldwell now lived on the West Coast in a one-bedroom apartment above a small repair shop near the Mission District. The rent was cheap, the water heater unreliable, and the walls thin enough to hear the neighbor's TV at night. But for the first time, the silence didn't suffocate him. It made him listen. Every morning, he walked 3 blocks to a local shelter where he volunteered fixing broken computers for kids. The pay was nothing, but the smiles were real. He learned to stretch $20 through the week, learned to eat cereal for dinner, and learned how to be grateful for small things, like warm sunlight through cracked blinds. Sometimes he caught his reflection in the shop window and barely recognized himself. The expensive suits were gone. So was the arrogance in his eyes. All that remained was a man still figuring out how to deserve forgiveness. At night, he'd sit by the window writing letters he never sent. Some were to the investors he wronged. Most were to Ava. He wrote about the center the cocoa she brought him, the way her voice softened when she talked about kindness. He wanted to tell her that the article hadn't been his doing, that he'd have given anything to protect what she built. But each time he finished, he tore the letter apart, because words alone had already failed her once. In New York, spring melted the snow along the curbs. The Brooklyn Arts Center reopened slowly with the help of a few loyal volunteers, but the energy wasn't the same. Ava still showed up every day, yet her smiles no longer reached her eyes. She avoided questions about the scandal, and when people mentioned Ethan, she simply said, "He's gone." Late one evening, as she sorted donation forms, she found a small envelope tucked under the supply cabinet. It was old, folded neatly, her name written in familiar handwriting, Ava. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. "Thank you for showing me what real work feels like. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending to be someone better. I was trying to become him." It wasn't signed, but she didn't need a signature. For a long moment, she just sat there, the paper trembling in her hands. Anger faded, leaving behind something quieter, a mix of sadness and longing. Maybe he had meant every word. Maybe he really had changed, but she wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. Back in San Francisco, Ethan began drawing again, something he hadn't done since college. The sketches weren't for investors this time. They were for himself. A skyline at dawn. A girl holding a cup of coffee. A community center with a cracked but glowing sign, Heart Foundation. He didn't know why he kept drawing it. Maybe because it was the only thing that still made sense. Frank, the older volunteer from New York, called him one afternoon. "Kid, you okay out there?" "Getting there," Ethan said. Frank chuckled. "Good. Miss Hart's still running the place. Could use some luck, though. Storm season's coming again." Ethan looked out the window, watching gray clouds gather over the bay. Something inside him shifted a quiet pull that felt like purpose. He hung up, closed his sketchbook, and whispered to no one, "She gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. Maybe it's my turn now." That night, he packed a small duffel bag. No suit, no plan, just resolve. Outside, the city lights of San Francisco glimmered against the water. Ethan started his car, the same old sedan that coughed every few miles. It didn't matter. He was heading east, back to Brooklyn, back to the only person who'd ever made him want to be a better man. Rain swept through the city as Ethan's old sedan crossed the bridge back into Brooklyn. The skyline shimmered in the distance, familiar yet distant, like a memory waiting to test him. He hadn't been here in months. The streets still smelled like roasted chestnuts and wet pavement, and the air carried that mix of noise and heart that only New York could make. He parked near the corner where the art center used to light up the block. Now the front windows were boarded in places, and a blue tarp fluttered above the roofline. A small handwritten sign read, "Closed temporarily. Flood damage." Ethan's stomach dropped. He hurried inside where the sound of dripping water echoed through the hall. A few volunteers moved supplies to higher shelves. Paint cans, brushes, and paper were stacked in uneven piles. And there she was, Ava Hart, standing in the middle of the chaos, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, trying to direct people while wiping rain from her face. For a long moment, he just watched. She looked tired, but still strong. Still the woman who refused to give up on anyone except maybe him. When she finally noticed him, her expression froze. Ethan. No title, no anger, just his name. He stepped closer, the sound of rain filling the space between them. "I heard about the flood. Frank told me. I came to help." Ava crossed her arms, her guard instinctively rising. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I'm here." For the next hour, they worked side by side in silence. Ethan carried soaked boxes to the back room, fixed a broken beam, and helped seal a leaking window. Every move was deliberate, not to impress her, but to prove he meant what he said. At one point, Ava slipped on the wet floor, and Ethan caught her before she fell. Their eyes met, a heartbeat suspended between guilt and something unspoken. "You should be careful," he murmured. She pulled back gently. "I've learned how to fall." Her words stung, but her tone wasn't cruel. It was weary, honest. By late afternoon, the rain eased. Ava stood at the window, watching puddles reflect the gray sky. Ethan joined her hands, still covered in dried paint. "You didn't have to come back," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to. Not for me, for this place. It deserves another chance." Ava turned to him. "So do you," she said. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Ethan's breath caught. "I don't expect forgiveness." "This isn't about forgiveness," she said. "It's about seeing who you really are now." She picked up a ruined photo from the counter, one from the winter showcase where he'd been helping a group of kids hold their paintings. Despite the blur of water damage, his smile was still visible. Ava looked at it for a long moment, then handed it to him. "Maybe you were meant to build something real this time." Ethan took the photo carefully, as if it were fragile. "I'd like to try," he said quietly. The sky outside cleared and sunlight streamed through the cracked windows, casting soft gold over the wet floor. For the first time in months, Ava smiled, not out of obligation, but out of something close to peace. Ethan watched her, realizing he didn't need an apology accepted to feel whole again. All he needed was the chance to stand beside her and do something good. The storm had passed, but for both of them, something new had just begun. Weeks passed, and the art center began to breathe again. The smell of fresh paint replaced the scent of mildew, and laughter once more echoed through the hallways. Ethan came every morning without being asked, patching walls, hauling supplies, teaching the kids simple sketches. He didn't talk much about his past. He didn't have to. Every small act said what words couldn't. Ava noticed the difference. There was a steadiness in him now, a quiet strength that didn't demand attention. When a pipe burst, he fixed it. When funding ran low, he reached out to old contacts anonymously. No press, no spotlight, no name, just effort. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the Brooklyn rooftops, Ava found him sitting outside the center, sketching on a scrap of cardboard. She leaned against the doorway. "Still can't put the pencil down, huh?" He smiled faintly without looking up. "Guess some habits aren't all bad." "What are you drawing?" He turned the cardboard toward her. It was a simple scene. The art center, the kids playing in front and above the door, a new sign that read, "Heart Foundation." Ava's breath caught. "Why that name?" she asked softly. Ethan met her gaze. "Because it's yours, and because everything good that happened here started with your heart." Her eyes glistened, the weight of months of silence pressing between them. She knelt beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't owe me anything, Ethan." He shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. You taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the only thing strong enough to rebuild a life." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city around them hummed car horns, laughter, the rhythm of life continuing. Then Ava said, "Tomorrow I have a meeting with new sponsors. They want to rename the program. Something modern, something corporate. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What will you tell them? That I already have a name, she said, smiling softly. And it's staying. He let out a quiet laugh. Good. As dusk turned to night, the lights inside the center flickered on. The building glowed with a golden warmth that neither had felt in a long time. Ethan stood and reached into his jacket, pulling out a small folded document. He handed it to her. What's this? It's the transfer papers, he said. I used the last of my savings to set up a permanent grant for the kids for this place. It's under your name, Ava. No conditions, no strings. Her hand trembled as she unfolded the page. Why would you do that? He smiled faintly. Because you gave me everything I couldn't buy, dignity, purpose, and forgiveness. The word hung between them, fragile and real. Ava blinked hard, trying to keep her composure. Then she whispered, I never hated you, Ethan. I just couldn't stand to see you waste what you had. He exhaled his voice, breaking softly. And now, she stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion and hope in his eyes. Now she said, You're the man I thought you could be. The next moment happened naturally. No music, no grand gestures, just two people who had been broken finding each other again. Ava reached for his hand. Ethan hesitated, then took it. Their fingers interlocked warm against the cool summer breeze. For the first time since everything fell apart, Ethan felt peace, not the kind built by power or wealth, but the kind that comes when you finally stop running from who you are. The lights inside the Heart Foundation flickered brighter, casting them both in gold. And just like that, the man who once thought love was weakness finally understood its strength. A soft spring breeze swept through Brooklyn, carrying the faint scent of coffee and fresh paint from the newly reopened Heart Foundation. Children's laughter spilled from the courtyard, their drawings fluttering on the walls like tiny flags of hope. Ethan adjusted a display board near the entrance. His hands steady, his sleeves rolled up. He wasn't Mr. Caldwell anymore, just Ethan the quiet mentor the kids called Mr. E. Ava watched from the doorway, a mug in her hand. He'd been there every day for the past year, never missing a morning, never losing that calm purpose that had replaced his old pride. The foundation had grown faster than either of them expected. They'd started art and tech workshops for underprivileged teens, and every wall of the building now told a story painted by hands that once doubted their worth. Ava stepped closer, her voice warm. The sponsors confirmed next month's funding. Looks like we'll finally open that second branch in Queens. Ethan smiled. Guess you were right. Kindness scales better than profit. She chuckled softly. I might quote that. Later that evening, the volunteers threw a small anniversary dinner in the main hall. Paper lanterns glowed overhead, and the same old record player hummed an old jazz tune. Frank made a toast to the Heart Foundation, built not by money, but by people with enough heart to start again. Everyone cheered, glasses clinking, and for a moment, Ethan looked around and realized this not boardrooms or headlines was what real success looked like. After the crowd thinned out, Ava found him outside under the soft glow of the streetlights. The city buzzed quietly around them. You still have that sketchbook, she asked. He nodded and pulled it from his jacket. Inside, the last page was blank. Ava took the pencil from his hand and wrote one line across it. From ruins, we build again. Ethan smiled, eyes soft. Perfect ending. Or a new beginning, she said. As the night air brushed against them, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. No grand speech, no crowd, just the two of them standing where it all began. He opened it quietly, a simple silver ring engraved with one word, heart. Ava's eyes filled and she whispered, I thought you didn't believe in forever. I didn't, he said, until you taught me what it really means. She nodded, tears mixing with laughter. Then yes, she said softly. Ethan slipped the ring on her finger, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he wasn't building an empire, he was building home. The Heart Foundation was quiet now. The lights inside glowed softly against the night, and the last of the volunteers had gone home. Outside, the city hummed taxis, music, laughter, but here, there was peace. Ethan sat on the front steps, hands clasped loosely, watching the mural on the building's wall, a giant painting of two hands holding a cracked heart stitched together with gold. The children had called it the broken heart that still beats. It was perfect. Behind him, Ava locked the door and walked over, a gentle smile curving her lips. Still thinking about tomorrow. He nodded. The grand opening in Queens. Feels strange, doesn't it, to build something and not have to worry about losing it. She sat beside him, their shoulders brushing lightly. That's because it's not built on pride this time, she said. It's built on people who care. Ethan looked at her, really looked, and realized how far they'd come. Two broken people who once ran from their own mistakes now sitting in front of a place that had turned both pain and love into purpose. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing the silver ring on her finger. "You ever think about how it started?" he asked. "You brought me coffee once. I gave you arrogance in return." Ava laughed softly. "And then you gave me chaos, and somewhere along the way, you gave me faith again." He smiled a little humbled. "You gave me more than that. You taught me that losing everything wasn't the end, it was the reset I needed." The streetlight flickered, casting a golden glow across their faces. Inside the center, the faint hum of the heater filled the quiet. Ava leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel the need to be anywhere else. Somewhere deep in the city, a church bell chimed midnight. New York moved on as it always did, but for them, this was the moment that would stay. The next morning, the Hart Foundation's new sign went up in Queens. Beneath the logo were 5 simple words: "We rise by lifting others." A crowd gathered families, kids, sponsors, and neighbors to celebrate not just a foundation, but the story behind it. A story of failure, forgiveness, and the kind of love that rebuilds quietly, but completely. Ava took Ethan's hand as the applause faded. "Ready?" she asked. He looked out at the smiling faces at the place they'd built together from nothing and said softly, "I've never been more ready." As the screen fades, the narrator's voice lingers. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what was real all along. Love isn't about saving someone, it's about becoming the person who finally knows how to stay. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more billionaire love stories where pride falls, hearts heal, and love always finds a way back home.